Hey everyone, welcome back to K-Korner, the channel where we dive into the wild world of entitled people and their unbelievable stories. Hope you enjoy it, and without further ado, let's go. Some background. My husband is pretty handy. Prior to COVID, he had done several flip houses as a fun side gig. It's what he loves to do, and he became very familiar with a ton of city code. During COVID, seems everyone was suddenly buying houses to flip out of boredom and prices skyrocketed, so he put that on hold. So then he started doing household repairs and upgrades, building fences, etc. around the neighborhood as well. To get a better understanding of the neighborhood HOA, bylaws, and whatnot, he joined the HOA Architectural Committee. Through that, he learned all there was to know about what was allowed and what was not, how the process worked, how to work around things, etc. Long story short, my husband was very knowledgeable in what to do and not do, and various processes with the neighborhood and the city. Our next-door neighbor decided they were going to start landscaping their backyard, and they, planned to make theirs as similar to our backyard as possible. Problem was, despite being next-door neighbors, our land was quite different. For one thing, behind our house was a bunch of brush and pine trees, maybe 3, forest from the lake that's at the back of the house. We didn't have to do a whole lot to clear the area, but the brush on their property was about 1/3 of their yard, I'd say 10 from the water. Also, the way the houses on our street are, the land naturally made like a valley, where the house to our right is at the top, we're in the middle, and the next 2 houses are at the bottom before it very quickly rises again. First thing the neighbors did was cut down all the trees in their backyard. They were not small trees either, but 4-story tall trees or more. Husband and neighbor were talking about the backyard plans when my husband casually mentioned he was surprised the city gave him permission to cut down so many trees. In our city, you had to have an arborist give permission to cut down any trees that were X feet tall. Neighbor first said it wasn't the city's business what he did with his backyard, then told my husband to mind his own business. Okay, fair enough. Then they started putting up the retaining wall to bring it up to level with our property, which would have been about 7/8 tall. Basically, they were just stacking a bunch of cinder blocks. My husband uneasily asked if their landscapers had ever done a retaining wall like that, and if the city approved it. The city says that if a retaining wall is over 5 tall, you need a structural engineer to come out. Neighbor said again it wasn't any of the city's business what he did to his yard, and for my husband to mind his own business. While they're filling up the backyard to bring theirs level to ours, the landscapers are dumping all the dirt, gravel, and sand in the street, blocking a little over half the road. Several of the neighbors who had trucks would just hop the curb, but other neighbors with smaller cars were mad. Before my husband could ask if they could put the dirt and stuff in their driveway instead of the road, like everyone else, neighbor went off on my husband to screw right off. Whoa, okay then. My husband let them continue working, and didn't say a word as they started constructing a 10-tall fence, which was against HOA regulations. Fences couldn't be taller than 6. Between them starting construction 6 days a week before 7 a.m. and them blocking the road, I guess someone had had enough. Next thing I know, city officials are out there putting a big-ass sign in the yard saying all construction was to be halted until further notice. It wasn't us, but my husband found out through the architectural committee that someone had complained about the noise and the road blockage to the HOA, who came out to investigate, saw everything they had done, and then reported them to the city. They got a hefty fine for every tree stump the city official found. The structural engineer said their retaining wall was not sound and had to be redone, and it had to have regular inspections during its build. The HOA also told them that not only did they have to take down their 10-tall fence, but as they did not get prior approval, and because it was not an approved design, the HOA also hit them with a hefty fine. Initially, neighbor came after us for tattling, but we told them it wasn't us, as nothing they did affected us in any way. Our kids are early risers, so even starting before 7 didn't bother us. My husband then said he tried to warn them this would happen, but neighbor told him to piss off and mind his own business, and he did. Landscaping had started on Black Friday, was shut down for 3 weeks while I guess they got things sorted out with the city and HOA. Their backyard is still not finished. Edit. I truly want to say it wasn't us that called the HOA or city. We just let him be. But he pissed off a lot of neighbors. When cutting down those trees, he had chainsaws and the wood chippers going off by 6:45, and the bobcat being used by 7 a.m. 6 days a week. Other neighbors tried to ask him to put his dirt on his driveway instead of the street. He told them off to mind their own business, too. And a few people went ballistic on him when their car slid a bit after the rains we had turned the remaining dirt to mud. The school bus could also easily have complained to someone about it too, as it was a big ordeal for them. Also, there were other things he did to his front yard that we didn't warn him about either, and he got dinged for. But I made this post mostly about him trying to go against the city. Although the changes he made to the driveway also got dinged by the city. And yes, from what I heard, tree fines were painful. Edit 2. No, really, it wasn't us, although not gonna lie. We almost ratted them out when they took out the beautiful oak tree in their front yard, put up a 20 flagpole, and put up a Chicago Bears flag. My husband can't stand that team. But we still kept quiet, and that flagpole was taken down about a week later. It could have been the HOA or city noticing on their own or a neighbor reporting them, because the clanging it made all day and night was awful. This occurred in a southern state. I won't mention the state, because, well, you'll see. I was an account manager for a digital marketing company. We sold lead generation services to business owners to generate leads. One of our key selling features was if you turned on call tracking numbers recorded phone calls, we'd guarantee you X amount of leads based upon iSpend. And if we failed to meet that, you'd be entitled to partial, or if we really failed, potentially full refund. Some things to know about advertising. CTN, call tracking number. It's a unique number that's assigned to a certain point of advertising that consumers call. This number is only on that piece of advertising. It routes to the business line, and unless a consumer is very observant, they have no idea they are using a CTN. Call recording. If you turn on CTNs, we can record the calls and store the audio on our servers. The business has to consent to this. Also, when you call, you'll hear a message this call is recorded for quality assurance type message. Both those are required to be eligible for our service guarantee. Storytime Part 1, The Lay of the Land. The business in question was a small dad and son contracting company with a couple employees. They primarily focused on smaller jobs such as windows, drainage, finishing, etc. Unfortunately, this business owner was a royal PITA. He went back years, and his account was filled with nothing but complaints. Also, there was a strong suspicion that he was racist because his last account manager was black. The business owner, who we will name Scott, refused to ever meet in person with the previous manager. Also, I was white. He had no issues finding the time to sit down with me and tell me how crap our service is. Well, it's coming up to do contract renewal, and he says we aren't producing his leads, and he wants to put in a claim for failing to meet our service guarantee. I spoke to my manager about this, and he said he wants me to listen to his calls, write a detailed report, and present my findings to the manager. The manager is worried this may end up in court due to the dollar amounts involved. Nearly a whole working week of hours. I probably spent damn near 40 hours on this, and I wrote a detailed 24-page report outlining the results of our advertising. To say I shred this business owner business practices is an understatement. The report was a straight-up attack on his poor customer service skills, disorganization, inability to execute, and complete and total failure of anything resembling any sense of standard business practices that just make logical sense. I will share with you a few examples of the types of calls I listened to, small calls where multiple phone calls are truly epic in their total incompetence. Customer 1. I was a small-time landlord who had 3 different properties that had received a quote from Scott for work. The landlord had accepted Scott's quote and agreed to do business. In one voicemail message, offered to pay a deposit to start work. Throughout 4 voicemail messages, this poor landlord went from, "Hey, I want to pay you," to, "Are you okay?" to, "Why the F aren't you returning my calls?" Yes, I said voicemails. Scott had gone out to this man's properties, quoted his pricing, and then straight up refused to do anything more. Why? I legit got no idea. I called the customer in question and said I was the quality assurance agency and was doing a survey on Scott's performance. The guy ended up paying Scott's competitor about 15 more to do the work and was utterly beside himself on why Scott ignored him. I was also confused. FYI, all my calls were recorded and put into the company records. Customer 2. This one in particular really pissed me off. Again, the public housing office called Scott to get a quote on work that involved 25 different homes. Scott was kind enough to answer the phone this time, which, ironically, was one of the few damn times he ever answered the phone. Initially, Scott sounded happy to get such a big, profitable job. Then Scott learned two things. It was Section 8 housing. It was a neighborhood that was Black Hispanic. Immediately upon learning this, Scott informed the housing office that, unfortunately, he's super booked, not true, and that this area is actually out of his service area, not true. The housing office was confused and was like, "So you're not interested in biting?" And Scott said, "No, I'm not," and hung up. He didn't even say goodbye. So I did a quality assurance call to the housing office, and the lady was completely confused why Scott wasn't even remotely interested in the job. Luckily for Scott, the lady didn't connect that Scott was a racist jerk because discrimination against a protected class is a crime. Customer 3. It was an overseas phone number from Japan. A service member stayed up late to call Scott during his business hours. This person told Scott he was deployed overseas. Still, over the weekend, someone broke into his home back in the States, where Scott operated out. He was trying to arrange for a new door. He mentioned this was an emergency as his wife was being forced to stay at a hotel. Scott never returned his calls, nor made any effort to contact him on the email he provided. No called the wife, who was local. It was a super easy job that Scott could have done in about an hour or so and made a solid profit. I think that's enough examples. Part 2, review and plan. The actual report at the end said out of the X phone calls, Scott failed to properly service the leads in about 70% of the cases, and that I could keep on going on. Still, I felt a clear trend had been established. It wasn't that our service wasn't producing leads for Scott. It was that Scott was a racist, bigoted jerk who everyone hated. Obviously, I said that in more professional language. When I presented the report to my manager, he looked at it and went, "Damn, 24 pages. I asked if it was fine, and he smiled and said, "I got a pretty good idea of what this is going to say." He said he'd review it and get back to me. So a day later, he came to me and said he'd gone over the report. The VP had gone over the report, and he asked what I thought the recommended course of action should be. My recommendation: remove all discounts, charge Scott total price for our services, and clearly explain our job is to provide him with leads. It's his job to sell those leads. If he can't convert our leads into business, that's not our problem. Scott was getting a 70% discount. Our price was built with discounts in mind. My manager was like, "He'll probably cancel." And I asked my manager, "And is that a problem?" If Scott was going to remain my client, he was going to pay dearly for that privilege. If he wasn't willing to pay, I was happy to let him walk. My manager smiled and said, "No." Part 3, the meeting. My manager and I called Scott and arranged a meeting. I created a PowerPoint summarizing my findings. About a 1/3 of the way, Scott gives in and tells me to get to the point. I knew this was going to be a heated meeting, so I wanted my manager present, both as support and a witness. So I explained that it's our job to bring him leads. It's his job to sell them. His failure to do that is not our problem. He gets irritable and pissy, and my manager backs me up. He goes, "Fine, I'll renew my contract at the same rate." To which I go, "Yeah, you see, you didn't let me get to that part. We have new pricing for you." Scott goes, "Lower?" I go, "Oh no." Not lower, my manager smirked. Scott asked me for the new rate. I hit him at the full rate, which was 3 times what he was paying. Scott is furious with me, says I'm overcharging him, says I'm ripping him off, says I'm a horrible salesperson. He tells my manager I should be fired for treating him like this. My manager looks at me, and I had been waiting for the moment. Truth be told, I gave 0 damns what Scott thought of me. If anything, my goal was to get him to cancel. Scott, you're a challenging client, therefore the pricing of our service needs to reflect the challenge of providing you service, so we will be charging you our full rate. If you like, I'd be happy to go over why this ROI still makes sense based upon our past performance. This was wording I had gone over with my management before using it. My manager felt it was fine. It felt so amazing, so say those words. It was the nicest way I could say you're AC if I'm going to work with you. It's got to be worth my while. Scott says we are a bunch of greedy pricks. He says, "I'm going cancel," to which I said, "That is an outcome we have decided is acceptable, if that's what you choose to do." Scott huffs and goes, "And what about my refund?" Dismayed, I go, "Scott, we've clearly demonstrated we did our part. The reason why you aren't bringing in sales is because of your company inability to close on the leads we generate." To which Scott goes, "So you're saying I don't know what I'm doing?" To which I say, "Scott, if you agree to sign at the new rate, I'd be happy to sit down with you and help you free of charge on how to improve your sales techniques and close more your leads." This is me telling him he doesn't know how to run his business, and was very much meant as an insult. Scott goes, "Nah, screw you. I'm calling my lawyer." I go, "So I take you're not going to renew?" He goes, "Hell no." My manager goes, "That's fine. Would you like us to email you our report on your leads?" Scott goes, "Sure. I'll show my lawyer. FYI, we never heard from Scott's lawyer." We wish Scott a good day, and he leaves. Later, we wrote him an email, attached the report, and also told him if his lawyer would like the recording in question, we can send that file over as well. Our bases were covered, and we knew it. I suspect he also came to the same realization, but he had too much pride to admit that. Part 4. Make sure the dagger is nice and deep. A few weeks go by. My manager says we got to shut down his account, so I need to call him and ask him what he wants to do with his CTN numbers, which we control. In our contract, we say at the end of the agreement the customer has the right to have the numbers ported over for a fee. It would have been normal to waive the fee as a gesture of goodwill, but Scott desired zero goodwill, and he received what he desired. I tell my manager there's no way I'm porting the numbers for free, and just like his quote, I'm charging him full rate $15 a number. The total came out to just a bit over $100. So I call Scott. I get his voicemail, but he doesn't answer. I write him a registered letter, and in that letter I outlined he has 30 days to respond. We have his CTNs, and if he's willing to pay a $15 per number port fee, we will transfer those numbers over to his phone provider. One morning I woke up to about a dozen hateful text messages in which Scott told me to go burn in hell. I took that to mean that Scott was not interested in porting over his numbers, and I reviewed those texts with my manager. We saved those messages and uploaded it to his account. So, is that all? Of course not. Part 5, but wait, there's more. So here I was with 7 CTN numbers that had been in service for literally years. Those 7 numbers were saved in Scott customers' phones, and to many of Scott's customers, those numbers were Scott's number. Obviously, they wouldn't be advertised to anyone, but that doesn't mean they won't produce phone calls. Now, if I just let the numbers die, the customers will call and simply be told this number is no longer in service. Now, I'm not entirely sure if what I did was legal, but it's been quite a few years, so I feel comfortable about introducing you to Bobby. Bobby was a Southern boy, but as much of an a-hole that Scott was. Bobby was a sweetheart. His mama would bake me pies for our meetings. He was a complete joy to work with. Bobby also owned a similar business to Scotty, but Bobby's business was more advanced, did more types of jobs, and also serviced the same area. So I submitted a service request to port all of Scott's 7 CTNs to Bobby account, and I waived the fee. So all of a sudden, hundreds of Scott's customers would think they were calling Scott, but they'd get Bobby. Bobby had all his call routed to his secretary Ashley, who was an angel. Ashley was also a wickedly talented saleswoman, and I know for a fact she'd be able to take Scott's clients and convert them for Bobby. So that's what I did. I had those 7 CTNs ported over to Bobby. This did a few things that benefited nearly everyone involved. Bobby got more business. I produced more leads for Bobby, which means Bobby was comfortable with spending more money with me, which meant I made more money. Scott old customers got better service. Part 6. Capitalize on my revenge. At the next performance meeting with Bobby, Bobby was very pleased with the sudden uptick in new customers. He even asked me, "What did you do to my account?" I smiled and said, "I reviewed your account and made a few tweaks. Have you seen any improvement?" He absolutely did. He asked me, "Did this cost me anything extra?" I go, "Nope." He ended up increasing our spend with us by about 40 on additional services. I Googled Scott business about a year later. He wasn't in business anymore. Wonder why? No, my company never caught on to me porting over the numbers. I strongly suspect our legal department would not have been pleased. From 2016, 2023, I owned a townhome in an HOA. I had the upstairs unit and a downstairs neighbor from hell. All units were tuber-tubo with attached garage. Since I was upstairs, my master bedroom was over my downstairs neighbor's garage. My second bedroom was over my garage. In 2021, I wanted to tear out the worn carpet in the bedrooms and replace it with wood floors to match the kitchen living room, which came with wood floors when I bought the place brand new. I reviewed the CCRs, which stated any floor renovations over livable areas must seek out HOA approval. I thought, great, the bedrooms are over garages which aren't livable areas, so I don't need approval. Had the floors changed? My downstairs neighbor was a heavy complainer. He'd complain to the HOA about everything. For example, I received 3 complaints in 2 months for running my dishwasher at night. Apparently, he could hear the water in the pipes and felt I was not allowed to do so. He complained about me coming home at 2 a.m., saying my garage door woke him up. Stupid things like that. After a dozen complaints, I got called up in front of the board to do that whole song and dance. I let it slip that I changed flooring on accident, which got them all wrapped up. I had my lawyer respond to them stating my bedrooms are over unlivable spaces and thus don't meet the requirement for approval in the CCRs, and even sent them the floor plan. The problem went away. Early 2023, I decided to sell the place. The buyer received the HOA report, which didn't mention flooring issues. Place sold. All was well until about 6 months later. I received certified mail from the new owner's attorney stating I failed to mention my unauthorized flooring, and since the downstairs neighbor was constantly complaining about noise, I was being asked to pay for new flooring to meet HOA rules or risk being sued. Had my attorney respond and both parties, myself and new homeowner, agreed to meet to discuss this. We both had our attorneys present. My attorney went over the fact that any pre-existing HOA issues would have been documented in the buyer's report provided by the HOA. The floors were not documented. The homeowner's attorney agreed. Homeowner was upset but agreed, and that was the last I heard of it until about 5 weeks ago. I ran into the homeowner while out running errands. I asked him what came of the flooring. He stated his attorney turned on the HOA, who lost the court battle and was forced to pay for new flooring. He ended up getting about $10 K of work done on the HOA's dime. The best part is, when the downstairs neighbor heard this, he sent his attorney after the HOA, claiming their negligence caused him emotional distress since they allowed a renovation to happen that impacted his sleep and ability to work from home. The HOA lost that court battle as well and had to pay him almost $80 K in damages. Apparently, the HOA is now in debt and is being forced to raise dues almost 200s to meet the requirements the county requires of them. Gotta love it when HOAs get shit on. I am a 52-year-old man that works as a butcher at a pork processing plant, and I never encountered a Karen in my hometown. Background: I live in a town of about 20,000 people in southeast Iowa. I've lived here my entire life, minus 6 years that I spent in the military and serving in Operation Desert Storm. Yeah, it's been 25 years. I was discharged in 1996, but it serves a relevant point that people always tend to mess with the ones they know nothing about. The story. The other day, I was at a neighborhood grocery store, we'll call it HIV to keep anonymity, and was buying a couple loaves of bread as I had run out. Now, at HV, their work uniform is a red polo shirt, with the company name embroidered on the left breast area in white khaki or black pants, and different colored aprons, black for the July meat counter, red for floor and front area, green for floral, and a white lab coat for the pharmacy. I couldn't have been in the aisle for 10 seconds when I feel a pair of eyes on my shoulder. I turn with a start, causing the woman directly behind me to give me a frown. I'll call her Karen. Me. You shouldn't stand behind people like that. You don't know how they'll react. Karen, I need your help. Stupid me didn't register the way she said that, which should have set off the alarm bells. Now, there are people out there that state their anger is on a short fuse. I don't have a fuse, I have a button, push it, and it's Armageddon. One thing I do have to admit, though, I've been pretty good at keeping it suppressed. I'm usually very level-headed. I'd had enough violence in my life. I would give anything if I could just live in peace. Me. If you want help, you should ask one of the employees. Karen, I am. Me, huh? The realization suddenly hits me like a tank and that she's talking to me. Ma'am, I don't work here. I was wearing a black t-shirt, black cargo pants, black socks, and black sneakers. There was nothing about how I was dressed that said I worked there. However, Karen must have been blind as well as deaf. Karen, don't lie to me. You work here. By this time, I can feel me starting to lose control. This insufferable oaf was wearing my patience thin. Me, what about my clothes says I work here? Karen, you're wearing an employee uniform. You need to help me. Now. Oh, bad move, Karen. Now I'm about 6'1" and weigh about 210 pounds. I'm not a small guy, and my voice is fairly deep, meaning when my volume goes up, I can get very intimidating. So much so, I've made more than a few scared of me. And at this point, manners have gone out the window. I'd had enough. Me matching shrill scream, booming growls. What damn part of "I don't work here, do you not understand, you irritating damn pencil neck"? After Karen loses the surprised look on her face, she balls up her fists and gets this "I'm gonna kick your ass" look. I see this. And at the same time, I notice a couple of employees behind me, so I return her look with a go ahead and try it. Look. Me. Fair warning, you swing on me like a man, you better be prepared to take a punch like a man. Well, Karen relaxes her hands. Then, she hauls off and slaps me across my face, knocking my glasses off and scraping the bridge of my nose. It did bleed a bit, but the kicker was that she was laughing. Apparently, Karen must have thought I wouldn't do anything. However, she tangled with the wrong guy. She turns to look at me and I put her on her ass with a slap across her face. Me. I warned you. Karen decides to play her trump card. Karen. I'm gonna have you arrested? I smiled widely and pointed to the security cameras installed in the ceiling to each end of the aisle. Me. Have a nice day, bitch. I grabbed my 2 loaves of bread and walked up front to pay while Karen is frog marched to the office in the back of the store. I found out the next day the grocery store decided to suspend her from the establishment for 30 days. Sucks to be her. Enjoying the stories yet? If you do, please subscribe, like, and comment. I just got back from a 3-day cruise that only went to RC's private island, K-Korner, which they now refer to as the perfect day. They have pools, a ton of water slides, little beach coves, etc. Knowing that we just wanted to enjoy the beach several months before the cruise departed, we booked a daybed, as they were more reasonable than the cabanas, and offered almost just as much for the money. The daybeds can be reserved, and depending on when you reserve them, you're going to be able to get a better location. First row closer to the water versus the third row further away from the water. Each daybed comes with 2 lounge chairs and an umbrella that is directly in front of the daybed. They are located adjacent to a large section of lounge chairs and umbrellas that are available on a first-come, first-served basis. If you get off the ship right when you first are able to 8 a.m., then you are likely going to get a better location, i.e., closer to the water, without anyone obstructing your view. All the chairs and daybeds are aligned in nice, neat rows and are meant to stay where they are. We got off the ship about 15 minutes after 8 and were pleasantly surprised when we arrived to our designated section of the island. It had been so long since I reserved the daybed that I had forgotten we had gotten one in the first row, thus ensuring unobstructed views of the beautiful Caribbean waters. At this time, this little enclave was sparsely populated, and we were one of only a few groups of people there. The front row of the lounge chairs had already started to fill up, though. An hour or so goes by and we're hanging out in the water when I see 2 older women pull their designated lounge chairs down from the third row of the daybed section in front of the first row of daybeds. I'm immediately asking myself where the hell these women get off thinking that this is okay. My next thought was of this sub and all the comments about nobody being more entitled than an older white woman. And here it was on full display. Within 15 minutes or so, it seems like their actions have given the same idea to an even older group of 3 women who pull their chairs from the large section of first come, first serve, lounges and pull up next to the first 2 ladies, now obstructing the views of nearly the entire first row of daybed. All 5 of these women had a very northeastern part of the U.S. way about them, between their distinctive look and accents. That was more than I was willing to tolerate. I paid for and planned enough in advance to have a first-row view, and wasn't about to let these entitled twats insert themselves into the picture. Thankfully, K-Korner daybeds have a concierge who is there to assist with these matters, and was incredibly helpful in ensuring that the laws of society in K-Korner were upheld. Of course, these women were all completely shocked that anyone would have an issue with what they did, and refused to go take their chairs back to where they dragged them from. I guess because of the degree of their Karen-ness. They got the concierge to allow them to obstruct the views of the people in the first row of lounge chairs who had gotten there early to ensure unimpeded views. They then proceeded to yell all around how they hoped that whoever it was who complained was happy to have their views back. Yes, I was happy. I did feel bad for the people in the first row of lounge chairs who, then had the unfortunate result of having these twats in between them and the Caribbean. My wife asked me why I couldn't just let it go, and I explained it to her like this: if I bought first-row seats to a football game, and then someone else who bought standing room only seats came and stood in the aisle in front of my seats, I'd want them to move to the section designated for standing room only tickets. Wouldn't you? Years ago when I was in college, I worked at my dad's law office to make a little extra money. I enjoyed the work and enjoyed working with my dad on the daily. He was a nice man and generous to a fault, sometimes so generous that people would take advantage of him, but he never seemed to mind. This is a story of a time I minded, though. I was getting close to graduating and moving on when a new girl, Jessica, suddenly came on the scene. She was in a paralegal program at the local community college and needed hours in the law office for a class or something. It's been a while, but the point is getting those hours was important to her completion of her class program. Jessica was interesting. She was in a paralegal program, but her main job at the time was working at a club. That's where she'd met my dad while he was out enjoying the evening with some friends. She told her story, and that's how she ended up applying at his office. I didn't think anything of it. She seemed a little standoffish, but whatever. Things quickly started to get out of hand, though. She'd cop an attitude with the full-time and part-time legal assistant on staff and act like she was the boss. She treated the fact that she was studying to be a paralegal as licensed to act like she was better than them because they didn't have degrees or certificates or whatever. And she just hated me. I was in a weird place where I was doing the work of a legal assistant, but I was also the boss's son, so I had a little more pull. The first time she tried to order me around, I laughed in her face. When I found out what she was doing with the other people in the office, people I'd known my whole life who were like family, I put the kibosh on the whole thing and reminded her she was there doing work study and therefore the lowest on the very horizontal org chart. She didn't like that, and I had a bad feeling about it all. I talked with my dad about my misgivings, but Jessica was young and my dad was a long-divorced man who was a sucker for a pretty face and a hard luck story. She had both, and he figured she couldn't be all that bad after she was talked to. That bad feeling I had didn't go away, though. I knew something was up, but I couldn't prove anything. Only Jessica had a live journal. That's how long ago this was. I figured she might have posted something there. She told me her name. But when I went to check it out, the thing was locked down and only her friends could see her post. Enter Tiffany. Tiffany was a dancer who worked in a club in a bigger city that was nearby, but not so close that Jessica would know the people who worked there. She loved dancing and loved meeting other girls who were in the profession. I know all this because Tiffany was me. More specifically, the LiveJournal account I created to friend Jessica. Sure enough, she took the bait. Tiffany didn't even have any posts, but I don't think Jessica ever bothered to check. Either way, I only needed access to her account for a few minutes before I found posts bad-mouthing everyone in the office. She went on about how she was a paralegal. She wasn't yet, and knew more than everyone in that office, even the lawyer, and was smarter than everyone there. Even more interesting were her plans to invite my dad back to her club so she could manufacture an incident and basically blackmail him with the threat of a harassment lawsuit for going to see her. At her invitation. At the club she worked at. Not the brightest bulb in the apple bushel, huh? I finally had the evidence I needed. I don't think her plan had much chance of succeeding. Dear old Dad might be a divorced man who enjoyed the ladies, but he was hands-off with anyone at the office. Not to mention blackmailing an attorney didn't seem like the best plan. Still, I figured it'd be best to nip this in the bud before it even takes off. So I print everything off and hand over the evidence to my dad. He's understandably furious. He took a chance on this girl that a lot of people probably wouldn't have, and she paid him back by treating his staff badly and plotting to blackmail him. He calls her to the office, then and there. She clearly seemed nervous when she came in. I silently handed her the copy of everything I'd printed off, and she knew the game was up. I had a big grin on my face as my dad told her that her services were no longer needed, and he would be in touch with her work and school. When the club was presented with evidence of what she was planning on doing to a client on their premises, she was told they would no longer need her services either. When the community college was informed of what she tried to do, she was told they would no longer need her as a student. Hey, Jess, don't screw with my family. Some background. I'm an avid Transformers fan and still collect figures to this day. A few years ago, I was looking for a BotCon exclusive shattered glass Rodimus. Prices on eBay were too high, so I turned to the Junkian Exchange on a website. I bought and sold items there several times and have gotten great deals. I put out a post of what I was looking to buy and waited. The next day, I got a message from a user I'll refer to as Kevin. Kevin said he had a shattered glass Rodimus and said he would sell it for $200. That was at least half of what they went for on eBay at the time, so I accepted and sent the money via PayPal as a gift. Some of the balance was paid via my PayPal balance and the majority off my credit card. $50 from PayPal and $150 from credit card. This detail is important later. In short, Kevin lied. He never had the figure I wanted and skimmed me out of $200. I went to the TFW 2005 forums calling this guy out and asked for help from the mods over there. After doing so, I called PayPal. Sadly, since the payment was sent as a gift, there was nothing they could do to refund me. However, the rep told me since about $150 was paid from my credit card, I can file a claim with them. He told me what department to call, who to talk to, and what sort of claim to file. Awesome. He also put a note on Kevin's account to be investigated. After calling my credit card company, someone on file 2005 emailed me saying they knew this seller, Arl, and gave me his contact detail. Normally, I don't support doxing someone, but he's a thief. I called Kevin and left a voicemail and text. He later called me and tried to play dumb. Then he said his TFW 2005 account and his PayPal were hacked. Really? What a coincidence. I told him he should refund my money or I would call his local police and have them sort this out. He caved after that and gave me a sob story about how he needed the money to buy his daughter a gift. I didn't buy the story and threatened legal action. He had to have his girlfriend send my money back through her PayPal account since he ended up getting locked due to all this nonsense. So I got my PayPal balance of $50 from him and my bank credited me $150. So I got my $200 back. Here's the kicker, I never told him I filed a claim against him with my credit card company. Keep in mind he only sent me back $50 for PayPal. My credit card company refunded me the $150. So that meant they had his info too, and they would come after him to recoup their costs. A week later, my bank called me and told me the seller was claiming I breached PayPal's terms of service and blah, 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 blah. I called the guy again and told him if he lied again, I would call the cops. An hour later, my bank said everything was resolved and to have a nice day. Thanks for joining us. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe for more captivating stories. Share your own experiences, opinions in the comments below, and let's keep the conversation going. Until next time, stay tuned for more epic tales.